Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. You're listening to our Dungeons and Dragons game, and as always, I am your host, the Dungeon Master, or DM for short. And in today's adventure, we are completing the expedition to the Barrier Peaks. This is the last part of that. This is part 5. If you haven't heard the previous parts of that module, I would go check those out first, or this might not make sense. And without further ado, let's dive in. The prologue to this one is that the player characters head down to level 5 of this spaceship that is sort of buried in a mountain. And there, Bart the Beholder kills some yellow mold with his death ray in Area 2. Then in Area 3, he kills a gray ooze. And in Area 4, they find another wheelie sled. In Area 5, they find more repair robots, but they can't get these working. And then there are also some areas where radiation is leaking. So the female android that had joined the party warns them whenever she detects a spike in radiation levels. And at any rate, they make very short work of level 5 of the ship. Level 5, in my opinion, if you're at all familiar with Star Trek and you know what a Jeffries tube is, it's sort of these crawl spaces that give you access to the machinery of the ship. That's what level 5 is here. Okay, so then we get into the plot of this one. After beating level 5, the PCs head down to level 6, where they start in a cargo hold, which is Area 1. There they find some rotten food as well as some metallic debris. No monsters. In Area 2, they find an auditorium. Area 3 is a theater. Again, no monsters. And honestly, that is creeping out the PCs more than the monsters do. By the way, I was playing the soundtrack to the movie Aliens from 1986. So that was really doing a nice job of kind of setting the atmosphere for this game. So by the time they reach the swimming pool in Area 4, they are very paranoid. There is an eye of the deep in the pool. They fight it, and it manages to freeze Bart in place for 1 minute. PCs can't help but think of this thing as an evil version of Bart, since it also has eye rays. Despite how intimidated they are, the PCs manage to kill the Eye of the Deep without Bart's help. If you've heard the earlier adventures, you know they've been relying really heavily on Bart recently. So taking him out of combat altogether was forcing them to do some stuff they haven't been doing. After the fight, they search the swimming pool and find quite a bit of treasure in the bottom of the pool. Jewelry, gems, platinum pieces are all on the bottom. So they're all diving in and out looking for treasure. And while they do, something swims into the ear of Voltaris Yol. It is an elithid tadpole. Voltaris slowly begins to turn into a mind flayer. After that, they head to the locker rooms in Area 5, where they don't encounter anything. When they enter the showers of Area 6, the showers come on automatically. They have motion sensors. The area fills with steam, and the PCs can't see very far. It's like fog. So what they don't know is there's 4 doppelgangers in here who copy the PC's appearances and begin to stalk them in the fog. The PCs pretty quickly figure out, though, that the doppelgangers don't have their magic items. So when the fight happens, the PCs, again, are the ones who win. Next, they go to Area 7, a gymnasium, and Area 8, storage, but they still don't encounter anything. Area 9 is a movie theater lobby. In here, a trapper drops from the ceiling, hitting Eliza the Air Maiden, doing damage. She kills it, though, and manages to get free. In Area 10, the PCs encounter 3 physical training androids. One of them is wearing boxing gloves, one of them has a fencing flail, and one of them is wearing a karate gi. Grabthar hits them all with lightning, disabling them. The androids have a vulnerability to electrical attacks. In Area 11, the PCs encounter 2 Shadu. These look sort of like horses with human faces. This is the hardest fight yet, and it lasts forever. During this fight, also, the PCs realize something is wrong with Volteris. They don't specifically know that he's turning into a Mind Flayer, but they know something's off. Area 12 is a workout area with another android that Grabthar destroys. Area 13 has more gas bats, as well as an android that has been trapped here ever since everything went wrong on the ship. This poor robot was on friendly terms with the ship's crew and had to watch them die one by one. So he is very depressed. The PCs feel bad for him. He joins the party, but thus far has no useful skills or input. He does, however, know that this ship is an escape pod from a larger vessel called the Warden. That was a starship from Metamorphosis Alpha. I'll talk more about that after the game. At any rate, that ship passed through an anomaly in space. Radiation that entered the ship caused mutations, and those mutants are ultimately what caused all the problems for this crew. In Area 14, Bart uses his death ray on some shriekers. And then in Area 15, they find a door. It is booby-trapped. When it is opened, 2 separate traps are activated. One is a grenade, which Bart deals with using his telekinesis. Another is a bucket of acid that drops on Eliza's head, killing her. Thankfully, Air Maidens respawn, so Eliza comes back. She loots her own body, but finds that the armor she was wearing is damaged from acid splash. The PCs try to enter the room, but there's a Mind Flayer in here. He is the one that put the tadpoles in the swimming pool, and he is very cunning. He has figured out how to use the tech here and has armed himself. He has a blaster, he has grenades, he has ammo. At the end of the day, this is basically Die Hard in reverse, where the Mind Flayer is an evil John McClane, and the players are the Germans from Die Hard. So they were very unnerved by this. When Min sticks her head around the corner, he shoots her in the head, burning her face. And the weapon he does heat damage. So her regeneration does nothing to help her with that headshot. She's not dead, but she's messed up. Grabthar tries to avenge her. He throws his hammer just as the Mind Flayer opens a portal. So the hammer does hit the Mind Flayer, knocking him back through the dimensional door, doing some damage, but then the door shuts. And as soon as it shuts, the hammer tries to return to the hand of the thrower, but now it's in a different dimension. It can't. So this too is demoralizing to the party. A round goes by and the PCs have no idea what to do. They're really off balance here. Finally, a portal opens again, and the Mind Flayer surprise attacks the party from behind them. He also throws a grenade at them. And the Mind Flayer has the ability to command monsters So he gets Bart the Beholder to be his minion. The Mind Flayer here is also using some sort of psychic abilities to speak to the mind of Volterus Yol. And so we get kind of a Dracula and Renfield kind of a thing happening here. Things look bad. Grabthar holds out his hand towards the portal when it opens and says, "To me, my hammer." And the hammer returns to his hand, flies to him. He then hits the Mind Flayer with it. Eliza hits the Mind Flayer with her +3 Frostbrand sword. Min hits with her dead sister's battle axe. And Arthur hits the Mind Flayer with the Holy Devastator. The PCs thankfully kill the Mind Flayer. And as soon as he's dead, his control over Bart stops, which is good because Bart was about to wreck the party. As soon as the Mind Flayer is dead, it can no longer use telepathy on Volterus either. So the voices in his head cease. For now, Volterus has free will. The PCs don't know if that will last. Eliza the Air Maiden gets out the book that she got in the Temple of Elemental Evil that has information about monsters in it. With it, she correctly diagnoses what's going on with Volterus. And Volterus yells, "Wait, I'm pregnant?" Then we get to the epilogue. Atropos the Endbringer sensed the moment that Arthur touched a piece of the Rod of Seven Parts. The very instant that Arthur touched it, when he found a piece in the Temple of Elemental Evil, it flashed blue. And Atropos changed course and headed for that point in space. So that said, Atropos, the undead sentient moon, crashes into the Temple of Elemental Evil. He was on fire from speeding through the atmosphere of the planet Oerth. The impact is an extinction event for this world. The shockwave from this impact passes over the land. Think of it kind of like the scene in Terminator 2 when Sarah Connor sees the nuke go off and it's going through Los Angeles. So what we see here is that world tree that the PCs planted ages ago is ripped apart. The cemetery with the glowing green crystals is destroyed. Even the barrier peaks where this adventure took place, they get hit by this shockwave. The rock is blown off of the seemingly indestructible ship. The ship is flung sideways. And Gamish, the ghost of a Tinker Gnome who was a trusted ally for years and years and years of games, that ghost can possess machinery, and right now it possesses the ship. So it activates the engines. From space, the area where the Temple of Elemental Evil was looks like a small black hole forming on the planet's surface. The planet seems to be caving in as Atropos feeds. As the planet is ripped apart, the hockey puck-shaped spacecraft streaks upwards towards the stars. In Wildspace, the ship is joined by a colossal elven armada. An elven armada, for those who don't know, is sort of like a big aircraft carrier, but the elves grow it out of wood and stuff like that. So it's sort of like a tree in space that has grown into the shape of an aircraft carrier. The PCs join the crew of the armada, and they meet Hibishi for the first time. Hibishi used to wield the Rod of Seven Parts before one of the minions of Atropos touched it and the rods separated into its component pieces, and each one of them teleported to a different place. Habishi is hesitant to touch the part that Arthur has brought back, the blue part, the blue piece. She is afraid that if she did, it might run away again. But as a consolation prize, the Orumvirax that the PCs found loves Habishi. So that makes her happy. Likewise, the Club of Dagda is here, and they use it on Max. The larger business end of the club causes death to whoever it touches, but the smaller end can bring anybody back to life. So Max is resurrected. She sees her sister Min and their brother Grabthar, and the green-skinned siblings hug and are happy to be reunited. The ghost of Gamish gets back in his warforged body. Arthur asks what he's doing, and Gamish tells him that the ship is on autopilot. He can't turn it around. He can't get it to change course. Nothing. It is returning to the larger ship it was part of. The depressed android that was pinned for years says, "Oh no." The PCs ask him what's wrong. The android tells them that this disc-shaped ship is just an escape pod of a far larger colony ship called the Warden. Eliza the Air Maiden asks why a bigger ship is bad news. Arthur says, seems like a bigger ship might have weapons on it that we could use against Atropos. But the depressed android says the bigger ship is full of dangerous monsters. That's why the human crew got in the escape pod and ran away. Outside, we see the smaller ship approaching the Warden. This colony ship is roughly 50 miles long, 25 miles wide, and 9 miles tall, and it is crawling with danger. So that's it for this adventure. We finished the barrier peaks. Shoot, what was it earlier I said I was going to comment on more later? Was it the Die Hard thing? It was very interesting that the sort of the final boss for the dungeon, instead of a big stupid monster, which is often the case, I thought it was very interesting to have a mind flayer be the bad guy, and he knows how to use the technology. I thought that was pretty cool. And the PCs instantly were aware that they were basically in the movie Die Hard. And like, not in a good way. I'll put it that way, not in a good way. As for the Warden, the big starship, that is from a game called Metamorphosis Alpha. And I've heard a very persistent story, and I've looked at some of the publishing dates and they don't quite make sense. So maybe take this with a grain of salt. But what I had heard was that the Expedition to the Barrier Peaks module for D&D, that was run by Gary Gygax at a convention, and the idea was it was a crossover basically between two different games. And so the idea was, let's get people to play this game, and then if you can get the ship out of the D&D world, if you can get it into space, it will take you to the Warden, and the Warden is just massive. And then that is a separate game called Metamorphosis Alpha. and I really like Metamorphosis Alpha, and I've actually ran it a bunch over the years. I don't know how many times I've maybe had half a dozen campaigns, totally separate continuities, all that took place on the Warden. Um, and I really like it a lot. I think it's really cool. I don't know if we will actually bother playing it out though, because my gaming group has done it so many times and it's just a lot of work. Um, it can be, in my humble opinion, it can be kind of thankless. And I feel like the prize is the ship itself, that you have this massive ship. You've got a ton of room where you can put stuff in there if you want, you know. But really, aside from that, you know, there's not really a lot of treasure in the traditional sense. There's, you know, like, how do I want to put it? I'm kind of struggling for words. I just don't know if they'd want to play it again. So we might just sort of take that shared experience that the players have and say, you know what, you do the thing that you have done a million times before. You know, you just clear the ship out. It's a huge ship, and every deck has a bunch of monsters on it. Something else I thought was really cool is they drop hints in Metamorphosis Alpha, because there are D&D monsters in there that are uh mutants. The story of Metamorphosis Alpha is that for some reason on Earth, everything stays cassette punk. So in other words, when the module was written in the 70s, for whatever reason, and I mean they were still doing stuff in the 80s, but like, so you have technology like cassette tapes and VCR tapes and things like that, but technology doesn't seem to really advance beyond that point. So in that game, like, there would be no such thing as like DVDs or CDs or anything like that. Even something like a cell phone. I don't think they would have a modern cell phone like we do now. I think it would be like those old ones, kind of like the old 80s car phones. You know, it'd be like everything would be kind of like bigger and clunkier. And I've never heard what it is about that timeline that makes that world like that. Like, the obvious thing is when they designed the game, they were just trying to envision the future based on 70s technology, right? So, but there's nothing in the game, there's nothing story-wise that indicates, well, here's why technology kind of looks the way it does. But at any rate, in their world, something really bad happens. And I don't know if it's like an environmental disaster or a war or what it is, but something bad happens. And the warden is sort of like Noah's Ark in a way. And some levels of the warden, they just fill it with stuff like plywood and lumber and stuff. And the idea is when you get to the planet you're going to, you can use that stuff to start building like 70s style houses on this other planet, and you can just start humanity over again. Um, but on the way there, they have some sort of problem where it passes through an anomaly, radiation is involved, and then, like I said, it's like a Noah's Ark kind of thing where they had like a ton of animals from Earth. Because my understanding of this is they're saying Earth is done, right? Like, there just isn't going to be an Earth anymore. And so they were trying to preserve like every life form from Earth. And so let's say you have something like a centipede and it passes through this radiation, it mutates into what Dungeons and Dragons would then call a carrion crawler, which is like a gigantic centipede that's, as big around as a bowling ball or something and maybe 10 feet long or whatever. I don't know. But you get the gist, right? Um, they toy around with the idea of pig DNA, and there might have been some other thing mixed in with it, but they have a race that are called porkers that seem to be the precursor to orcs, right? And so what they seem to be suggesting is that the the warden reaches the D&D area of space, that part of the universe. And the creatures from the ship end up on various planets, and then over the years they evolve. So Metamorphosis Alpha seems to be suggesting that um basically this is the genesis story for Dungeons and Dragons. And I always thought that was a really interesting idea. Um I'm not as into the orc thing myself personally, um, because I've never really ran my orcs as very pig-like at all. Um, I feel like their orcs, or well, excuse me, I feel like their porkers are also they act a little different than orcs do. And I tend to run my orcs where they're a lot more like Klingons from Star Trek. And the porkers to me are more like just sort of bikers, kind of like drunk bikers. Um, where I don't feel like they have a lot of honor or anything like that. I could go on a big thing about it, but I kind of lean away from that part of it. But the rest of it, I kind of like. I like the idea that carrion crawlers are just like giant mutant centipedes and so on and so forth. Personally, I've always liked science fiction more than fantasy. That's just my personal preference. And so because of that, um, I find that I enjoy fantasy more if I think about it as like this is a story that takes place on another planet. Like for instance, Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones doesn't take place on Earth. It's not the map of Earth, right? So in my mind, if like a human astronaut were to show up in the middle of Game of Thrones, I would be so into that because then everything that happens there is an alien planet. The dragons and stuff would, everything becomes science fiction then. So for me, as a sci-fi fan, that's kind of the route I go with things. Um, and the Warden is just kind of throws a spotlight on that. You know what I mean? Um, so yeah, I love the Warden. I love Metamorphosis Alpha. Um, my birthday's coming up. I would love to like run it on my birthday. I I feel like my PCs would not be super into that. Um, just because we done it so much. I think they liked it before, it's kind of like they liked it. Every time we run it, I think it loses a little bit of its luster. But at any rate, seems like there was something else I was going to talk about, and I derailed. Now I don't know what it was. I don't know. Whatever it was, I'll either talk about it in a future video or I'll mention it in the comments section. Had another day today where the kids had no school. Um, it rained last night, everything got wet, and then overnight it froze. Everything was covered in a sheet of ice. And then this morning it snowed some more. So when you have that light dusting of snow on top of the ice, seems to be sort of maximum slipperiness. So everything was kind of shut down here today, and it was nice to finish off the adventure. It was nice to finally completely do the barrier peaks. I feel like we left no stone unturned. Um, I don't know. I liked it. I hope that you liked it. If so, be sure to hit that like button. Um, hit subscribe, ring the bell for notifications, all that jazz, and we'll see you in the next one.